I probably earned the title of public enemy number 1 in Oak Valley the day I cut off the water supply to 328 homes right in the middle of a record-breaking Nevada heat wave. But hey, if someone drills a pipeline through your land without asking, what are you supposed to do? Smile and water their roses? I don't think so. So there I was, sitting on my porch, sipping peach iced tea, watching Madison Caldwell, president of the Oak Valley HOA, complete with designer heels and platinum blonde highlights, banging on my front gate like it was the gates of hell. Her face was so red I worried she might spontaneously combust. But let's not get ahead of ourselves. You need to hear how this all started, and trust me, it gets wilder than anything you're imagining. I never planned on returning to rural life. My name's Jack Callahan. I'm 35, a software engineer from Seattle who spent the last decade creating back-end systems for freight companies. Glamorous? Not really. Lucrative? Sure. Stable? Absolutely. I liked my life neat, efficient, and predictable, until I got that call. Massive stroke, the doctor said over the phone. Your mother didn't make it. Just like that, my world shifted. By the time I touched down in Reno and drove the 3 hours to Oak Valley, it was too late. The house was quiet, cold, empty. My mother, Clara Callahan, had run the family ranch, 40 acres of high desert terrain, for over 2 decades since my dad passed. She was a fighter, always had been, but no one wins every battle. At the funeral, I shook hands with people who knew everything about my childhood, while I could barely remember their names. They told stories about my mother I'd never heard, laughed like old friends, and cried like family. That night, I sat alone on the porch, looking out over the land I hadn't stepped foot on in years. Sagebrush swayed in the wind, and the mountains in the distance caught the fading sun like fire. My Uncle Hank joined me, tipping his worn cowboy hat back. She'd left it all to you, Jack. Said you'd know what to do when the time came. I didn't know what that meant. I wasn't a rancher. I barely kept a cactus alive in my Seattle apartment. But something inside me stirred. I took a leave from work, told myself it was just a sabbatical, and moved into the ranch house. At first, I thought I'd renovate and sell it, maybe turn the land into a solar farm. But every morning I woke up to wild mustangs grazing near the fence line, and stars so bright they looked fake. And I began to feel like maybe this was supposed to be mine all along. Then came the letter. It arrived in a cream-colored envelope with a fancy gold emblem I didn't recognize. It was an invitation from the Oak Valley Homeowners Association, inviting me to a community mixer at the Oak Valley Welcome Center. I raised an eyebrow. My mother had mentioned the new housing development on the north side a few times. She'd called it the invasion. These HOA folks think they own everything just because they have cul-de-sacs and infinity pools, she once grumbled. I figured she was exaggerating. Turns out, she was being polite. Still, I decided to attend. Maybe it'd be good to introduce myself, smooth things over. I showed up in clean jeans, boots, and a flannel shirt. Figured that was decent for a rancher. The Welcome Center looked like a luxury spa. Glass walls, polished wood, and a bartender serving cucumber essence water. I immediately felt like I'd wandered into the wrong universe. That's when I met her, Madison Caldwell, 42 years old, eyes sharper than a hawk, smile like a knife. You must be Mr. Callahan, she said, shaking my hand like she was checking for weakness. We've heard so much about your mother, such a strong presence. The pause told me everything I needed to know. They hadn't liked her, and they weren't planning to like me either. She introduced me to her sidekick, Gerald Pierce, HOA vice president and retired federal claims adjuster. He nodded without blinking. We made awkward small talk about land use compatibility and aesthetic coherence. Then Madison got to the point. "Jack," she said, guiding me to the back patio where we could see her sprawling neighborhood of pristine homes. "Your property is, well, let's say it's a bit of an eyesore for our community. We'd like to make you a generous offer to purchase the land." I sipped my drink slowly. "How generous?" She named a number that made me laugh out loud. "That's about 35% below market value," I said. Madison's smile thinned. "But it's cash, and fast. You wouldn't have to deal with all the permits and upkeep. I mean, you're not planning to run a ranch, are you?" "I haven't decided," I said, setting my glass down. "But I know I'm not selling." Her demeanor cooled like someone flicked off a switch. "Jack, let me give you some advice. Communities like Oak Valley work best when everyone's on the same page. We prefer cooperation. It makes life easier." I stared at her. "Did you just threaten me with HOA consequences if I don't sell?" She tilted her head. "Of course not. Just something to think about." That night I told Uncle Hank what happened. He nodded like he'd seen it coming. "They tried that with your mom, too. Sent her fake violations. Called county inspectors. She didn't budge. Neither should you." I went digging through my mom's old files and found a thick binder labeled HOABS. Inside were dozens of letters accusing her of non-compliance with landscaping codes, water usage, barn color, none of which had legal standing. Our ranch wasn't even under their jurisdiction. And that's when I realized they weren't just offering to buy the land. They were trying to bully me off it. And I don't like bullies. What I didn't know yet was how far Madison Caldwell was willing to go to get what she wanted. But I was about to find out. And when I did, I'd make damn sure she regretted ever crossing the Callahans. It was a Tuesday morning when I first saw it. I was walking the southern fence line trying to clear some overgrown sagebrush when something unusual caught my eye. The ground near the back pasture looked disturbed. The soil was too soft, too fresh, like someone had been digging recently. I crouched down and brushed away a layer of dust. And that's when I saw it. A black PVC pipeline. Brand new. Running under my land. My first thought was, no way, this isn't ours. And my second, Madison Caldwell. I followed the pipe with my eyes. It was partially buried but still visible in spots. It led directly from the creek on our property, the one that never ran dry, even in drought years, straight toward Oak Valley. I felt the heat rise in my chest. I called Sarah Becker immediately. She was an old friend from college, now one of the best land use attorneys in the county. She showed up within the hour, along with a county surveyor she trusted. We traced the pipe together, and the surveyor confirmed what I feared. The pipeline cut 29 feet into my property. No easement, no permits, no request, just a blatant land grab. Sarah was livid. "This is straight-up trespassing," she said, snapping photos with her phone. "They've installed infrastructure on your land without consent. That's a lawsuit waiting to happen." "And the water?" I asked. "That's the worst part," she replied. "In Nevada, water rights are sacred. You don't touch someone's supply without a signed agreement, court order, or a death wish. That creek feeds your land. And clearly, they're fountains." That evening, I drove straight to the Oak Valley HOA office and asked to speak with Madison. She kept me waiting in the lobby for 30 minutes. When she finally appeared, she wore the same smug smile I remembered from our first meeting. "Jack," she said, like we were old friends, "have you reconsidered our offer?" Instead of answering, I pulled a manila envelope from my bag and slid it across her glass desk. "What's this?" she asked. "Photos of the illegal pipeline running through my land. I suggest you remove it immediately." She barely glanced at them. This is a serious accusation. Backed by a certified survey and my attorney, I replied. You have 48 hours to respond before I file for trespassing and illegal infrastructure. Madison's smile tightened. We believe we have pre-existing water rights. If there's any boundary confusion, I'm sure we can resolve it amicably. There's no confusion, I said, sliding over a copy of the survey. But if you'd like to test that in court, be my guest. As I turned to leave, she called after me. You're making a mistake, Mr. Callahan. Your mother eventually learned how things worked around here. So will you. Back at home, I told Uncle Hank what happened. He chuckled, but not with humor. Your mom fought them tooth and nail for years, he said. They fined her for everything. Tall grass, peeling paint, too many chickens. She kept every notice. Said someday you might need 'em. Sure enough, I found a box in the attic. It was full of violation letters. Some handwritten, some typed. Some even came with photographs. The funniest one? A fine for unregistered livestock, meaning a stray goat that wandered through the fence once. This is harassment, I muttered. Sarah agreed. We met at a diner the next morning, the box of letters between us. They have zero jurisdiction over your property, she confirmed. You're not inside their HOA boundaries, which means all of this is intimidation. But don't underestimate them. HOAs have deep pockets and dirty tactics. So, what's next? I asked. Sarah leaned forward. We start documenting everything. Install cameras, monitor your water levels, and check your fences daily. If they were bold enough to lay a pipeline without permission, they're not done. She wasn't wrong. 3 nights later, the cameras I installed, disguised as birdhouses, caught movement at 2:07 a.m. A small crew, led by a man I'd later learn was Brad Hopkins, Oak Valley's facilities manager, was digging near the creek. They were expanding the connection point. One of them pulled out a phone and said, "Yes, Ms. Caldwell. We're boosting capacity now. Should give us 30% more." Direct evidence. I sent the footage to Sarah. She filed for an emergency injunction the next day. But legal wheels turned slowly, and Madison Caldwell, she had already moved to Plan B. First came the rumors. At the hardware store, a neighbor asked if I was really building a Bitcoin mining facility. At the feed shop, someone asked about a waste treatment plant. Online forums lit up with questions like, what is that new guy really doing with the ranch? Then came the official harassment. A county inspector named Thomas Green showed up unannounced, citing anonymous complaints about unpermitted structures. He found nothing, because there was nothing. But the message was clear. Madison had friends in places that mattered. The real kicker? A certified letter from the HOA inviting me to a board meeting to discuss environmental concerns related to Callahan Ranch. It was a trap, but I went anyway, with Sarah and a voice recorder. The meeting was a circus. Madison presented a slideshow of my property that made it look like an abandoned landfill, fire hazards, mosquito breeding grounds, visual blight, she called it. Then she turned to me, faux concerned. Mr. Callahan, do you have a plan to address these issues? I stood, calm and steady. Yes, I said. Let's start by talking about the unauthorized pipeline you installed, the water you're stealing, and the $400, 0 cents per household you've been collecting for a fake upgrade. Silence. Sarah leaned in. We also have video of your facilities manager confirming your involvement. Chaos erupted. Homeowners shouted. Some demanded refunds. Madison called for adjournment, but not before half the room demanded an independent audit. We walked out knowing one thing for sure. we'd cracked the dam. But I also knew something else. Madison wasn't finished. And whatever came next, it was going to get uglier. The night after the HOA meeting, I sat at the kitchen table with Sarah, staring at a pile of documents, camera footage, and letters. My head was buzzing. Not from caffeine, but from something more potent. Strategy. We need leverage, I said. Something that shifts the balance. Sarah raised an eyebrow. You already have leverage. You're holding a loaded legal shotgun. Yeah, I replied, but she's wearing body armor. That's when I remembered something my mom once said. During a stormy dinner when I was 15 and just got suspended for punching a rich kid. Smart fights win wars. Jack, not loud ones. It was time to play smart. Our first move? Make the water problem visible. Not just to lawyers, but to the public. We started with data. How much water was being stolen, how long it had gone on, and how many households were being billed for it. Then we installed high-definition motion cameras, camouflaged as birdhouses. Infrared, weatherproof, motion stereotype. 3 days later, jackpot. Brad Hopkins, that smug facilities manager from the HOA, showed up again, this time in broad daylight. The footage showed him expanding the intake valve at the creek, muttering into his phone. Yeah, it's almost done. Caldwell wants this done before next week's inspection. Clear as Nevada sky. I took the footage to Sarah. She smiled for the first time in days. Perfect. Not just trespassing, but trespassing after you officially told them to stop. That's willful. Meanwhile, Jennifer, my younger sister, and a full-time investigative journalist, drove in from Salt Lake City, hair still in a messy bun and laptop under her arm. You're playing defense, she said, scanning everything we had. It's time to go nuclear. Jennifer wasn't one for subtlety. She dove into Madison Caldwell's background like a shark sensing blood. Within 48 hours, she uncovered a pattern. 2 previous neighborhoods in Arizona and Colorado, both with HOA controversies, both involving mysteriously forced land sales after harassment, vandalism, zoning violations, permit manipulation. Madison had left a digital trail as neat as her lawn. Then came the bombshell. Buried in the county recorder's database, Jennifer found a supposed agreement signed 2 years ago by my mom, granting Oak Valley limited access to the creek for non-summarily use. It had all the right stamps, all the right formatting. One problem. It was fake. I recognized my mother's handwriting like my own heartbeat, and that signature wasn't hers. Sarah cross-referenced it with 3 known documents. This, she said, pointing, is either forged or forced. Either way, it's legally radioactive. So now we had this forged document, video evidence of active water theft. Homeowners were being charged for system upgrade, and a corrupt inspector who just happened to keep showing up with complaints. But the real turning point came from Jennifer's research into the Water Board's weekly bulletins. She found a notice. The headwaters of our creek, located on public land just upstream from my ranch, were up for auction. A water rights sale. In 30 days. I blinked. Wait, if someone else buys it, they control the flow, Sarah finished. They could legally starve your land or charge you to use your own creek. Jennifer grinned. So, we buy it first. The plan clicked into place like gears in a lock. Sarah formed a shell company. Desert Rock Resources, LLC, registered to her office in Reno. We couldn't risk Madison discovering our interests and outbidding us. Then we met Dave Warner, chairman of the local water board. He'd clashed with Madison before. That woman's poison, he said, shaking her hands. Tries to grease everyone with HOA donations and dinner invites. Thinks we're blind. He couldn't legally help us, but he could explain how the bidding process worked. Timing, submission protocols, red tape. We filed our bid 2 weeks early. The purchase price was steep, $45,000, 0 cents, for a scraggly patch of land and a spring that most folks overlooked. But we knew the truth. That scraggly patch was the origin of a creek that watered 300 homes, 3 fountains, and a $6 million 0 cents HOA landscaping budget. We owned it now. Quietly. No press. No celebration. No announcement. And just in time. A week later, Madison marched into the water board's office, demanding to know who bought the rights. Dave called me that night, chuckling. She looked like someone peed in her lavender tea. The next morning, retaliation came swiftly. Our tractor, only a year old, was sabotaged. The engine filled with sand. The cameras caught 2 men in hoodies, faces hidden, walking off our property at 3:14 a.m. That afternoon, our mailbox was smashed. Again. By nightfall, someone had spray-painted "Sell or Burn" on the front of our barn, in blood-red paint. Mom's rocking chair creaked behind me. She looked at the mess, then at me. "Your father built this ranch with bare hands? Ain't no plastic princess with a checklist gonna run us off." Sheriff Owen, who I'd grown up with, came to take the report. He shook his head, but I could see hesitation in his eyes. "Look, Jack, I can't just arrest HOA people without proof. You have video." Shrugged. "Anonymous vandals in hoodies. Won't hold up. And truth be told, the HOA donates a lot to the department." That said it all. So we pivoted again. Jennifer compiled everything, video, records, forged documents, into a multi-part exposé, a true investigative piece. We weren't just building a legal case anymore. We were building the court of public opinion. "When we drop this," she said, "it'll spread like wildfire." But the timing had to be perfect. Meanwhile, Sarah coordinated with engineers to install a remote control water valve at the headwaters. Completely legal. We filed permits for resource flow regulation and conservation. Nothing shady, just strategic. We now had legal ownership of the water source, the ability to shut it off, proof that Oak Valley had no legal right to their pipeline, and the receipts to prove they'd been scamming their own residents. The trap was nearly set. They wanted a war. We were ready to fight. The sun had barely cleared the mountains when I stood at the edge of the headwaters remote, in hand, heart pounding in my chest. My thumb hovered over the button for half a second before I pressed it. The valve engaged with a soft metallic click. Nothing dramatic, no explosion, no flood, just a simple sound that would change everything. The flow stopped. Not completely, just slowed to a whisper. That morning, I went about my day, fixing a gate in the back pasture, checking on the chickens, pretending like I hadn't just declared war on an entire HOA by cutting off their lifeline. By noon, the first signs appeared. The fountains at the Oak Valley entrance sputtered and stopped. By evening, sprinklers weren't turning on yards that once looked like golf courses began to curl in the Nevada sun. And by the next morning, water pressure in homes had dropped to a trickle. People started talking, and then they started screaming. News vans rolled in by day 2, parked just outside the Oak Valley gates, looking for someone to blame. Naturally, Madison Caldwell was ready for her moment. She stood in front of the cameras with perfectly curled hair and a sorrowful expression. "Families are suffering," she declared dramatically. "Elderly residents are at risk. Children can't even bathe. All because one man refuses to be a good neighbor." She never mentioned the illegal pipeline, the forged agreement, or the thousands of dollars in special fees her HOA had been collecting. The media ate it up at first. Victim versus villain. Community under siege. But then Jennifer dropped the hammer. Her video expose went live on 3 major platforms, complete with timestamps, legal documents, expert interviews, and drone footage showing the pipeline snaking through our land. "This isn't about a man shutting off water," she said on camera. "This is about a corrupt HOA stealing resources, defrauding its own residents, and retaliating when they got caught," and exploded. Within hours, people weren't just asking questions. They were demanding answers. And that's when the mob showed up. It was late afternoon when I heard them coming, a slow-growing roar of engines, voices, gravel crunching under tires. I stepped onto the porch and there they were, a wall of angry residents outside our gate, waving signs, shouting through a megaphone. Madison stood front and center, bullhorn in hand. "Turn the water back on, Callahan," she yelled. "This is illegal, immoral, and inhuman." Behind her, the crowd was split. Some red-faced and furious. Others glancing nervously at their neighbors, unsure. Cameras rolled. I stood tall and calm, Mom and Jennifer beside me, Sarah just behind the screen door filming everything. I spoke clearly and evenly. "This is private property. You are trespassing and harassing my family." Madison pointed a trembling finger. "You're destroying this community. People will remember this forever." I took a breath. "What I'm doing is managing water from land I legally own. A creek you've been stealing from through an unauthorized pipeline you installed without permission. Have you told your neighbors? They've been paying hundreds of dollars a year for stolen water. Or about the document you forged with my dead mother's signature." A hush rippled through the crowd. Someone near the front, Mike Hansen, a father of 3 and HOA member, stepped forward. "Is that true, Madison? Did we pay for stolen water?" Others chimed in. "What about the extra fees? Who signed that agreement with the Callahans?" Madison's mask cracked just slightly. She opened her mouth, but nothing came out. That's when Sheriff Owen arrived, sirens off, hands up, trying to ease the tension. "Let's all calm down," he said loudly. "This is a civil matter. We don't need this turning into a scene." He turned to me privately as the crowd murmured. "The mayor wants to see both parties tomorrow, 9 a.m. City Hall. Let's fix this before someone does something stupid." That night I sat with Mom, Jennifer, and Sarah in the living room, lights low, tea cooling on the table. Richard Coleman, HOA vice president, called around 10, his voice strained and quiet. "You've made your point, Callahan," he said. "Let's find a way out of this. Turn the water on, and we'll negotiate." I wasn't buying it. The time for fair deals was before they trespassed, before they vandalized, before they lied. I gave him nothing. Then I sent a notice to every household in Oak Valley. 6 hours of water flow starting midnight. Just enough time to fill tubs and buckets. A small gesture, not out of kindness but strategy. I wanted them to see clearly that I wasn't a monster. I was the man in control of their supply. Jennifer showed me the metrics in the morning. The videos had gone viral, over 2 million views across platforms, and the tide of public opinion was shifting fast. We walked into City Hall like we belonged there. Mayor Bill Hargrave presided over the meeting, stone-faced, flanked by lawyers and media. Cynthia, Madison, Richard, and their attorney sat across from us in suits, a full PR team behind them. "Let's get to the point," the mayor said. "Callahan, did you restrict water flow to Oak Valley?" "Yes," I replied. "After discovering an illegal pipeline built through my land, and after multiple failed attempts to resolve it amicably, I purchased the upstream source and took protective action. The mayor nodded, then turned to Madison. Does the HOA have legal access rights? She smiled calmly and presented the forged document. Again, the one we already disproved. Sarah spoke next, her voice cool and professional. We have handwriting analysis showing the signature is forged. We also have footage of active trespassing vandalism and unauthorized water extraction. Then the real twist. Lisa Thompson stood up from the audience holding a stack of papers. "Excuse me, Mayor," she said, "but as an Oak Valley resident, I represent 120 households who signed a petition demanding transparency from our HOA." Gasps, murmurs, flashbulbs popping. Lisa continued. "We've been paying special water assessments with no accounting, and we want answers." Mayor Hargrave ordered a recess, and our team gathered with Lisa and Mike Hansen in a side room. That's when Mike dropped the final card. He had uncovered financial records showing Madison had embezzled over $200,000 in HOA funds for personal renovations, vacations, and luxury purchases. Even Brad Hopkins had come forward, privately admitting he was ordered to forge the agreement with my mother's name. When the meeting reconvened, Sarah calmly handed over the evidence to the city attorney, requesting an immediate investigation. Madison Caldwell finally lost her composure, screaming about conspiracies and vendettas. But Richard just stared at the floor. The mayor stood solemnly. "Pending legal outcomes and public interest, the city recommends removal of all unauthorized infrastructure, fair compensation for past water use, and a formal apology from the HOA to the Callahan family." Richard agreed in principle, his voice barely a whisper. Madison stormed out of City Hall muttering threats, her heels clicking down the marble floor like gunshots. We walked out together, past cameras and microphones, past flashing bulbs and furious whispers. Mom squeezed my hand. "Your father would have done the same," she said. "Maybe not with cameras, but with heart." And I knew she was right. The battle wasn't over yet, but the tide had finally turned. I was ready for whatever came next. 9 days. That's how long the quiet lasted. After the City Hall showdown, after Madison stormed out like a villain in a soap opera, after the cameras left and the HOA board agreed to our terms, we thought maybe, just maybe, it was over. The residents removed Madison and Richard from the HOA board in an emergency vote. Lisa Thompson stepped in as interim president, and within a week, she began working directly with us, drafting a legitimate water access agreement at market rates. The illegal pipeline was shut down and plans for a new regulated system began. The 6 hours of daily water resumed. And even Sheriff Owens started taking the vandalism complaints seriously, now that Madison's political shield had cracked. But that peace, that silence, was too clean, too perfect. And then came the letter. A certified notice from the Nevada Environmental Protection Division citing an anonymous complaint of possible water contamination on our land. They ordered all water use suspended pending investigation. The source was a familiar name. Thomas Green. The same Inspector Madison used before, the same man who ignored our boundaries, now claimed we were poisoning the creek. Phones started ringing nonstop. Reporters, neighbors, officials. The story broke fast headlines accusing us of toxic runoff contaminating a residential water supply in a heat wave. There was a perfect setup. Sarah, Olivia, and Jennifer sprang into action. We brought in a private testing firm and filed for immediate independent state-level analysis. Mayor Hargrave even sent a city engineer to observe the process. And the results came back fast. Claim: every sample from our property, especially at the source, was free of contaminants. But one section, where the creek passed into Oak Valley, showed traces of industrial solvents. Someone had planted them. Jennifer dug into Green's background and uncovered past disciplinary actions, including fabricating inspection reports in exchange for money. Worse, he had direct business ties to Madison's ex-husband. Olivia had seen enough. She brought it to Sheriff Owen, who finally had enough political air cover to act. He obtained a warrant for Green's office and Madison's home. What they found blew everything open. Forged inspection reports, check stubs from Madison to Green, a stash of the same chemicals found in the creek, along with receipts dated just 3 days before the contamination claim. Madison was arrested trying to board a flight to Cancun with a suitcase full of cash. The charges stacked up fast. Forgery, fraud, conspiracy, environmental violations, embezzlement. Brad Hopkins flipped, taking a deal and providing full testimony against her. Suddenly everything unraveled. Richard Coleman also took a plea bargain in exchange for financial records showing where the missing HOA funds went. The Oak Valley community was stunned. Lisa held open forums and town halls. She opened the books. Residents who had once screamed at me were now shaking my hand in the hardware store. We reached a full legal settlement that paid restitution for the years of stolen water trespassing damages and the vandalism. I didn't keep it all. Some of that money went into upgrading the ranch's irrigation system, making it drought-resistant and sustainable. Some went into scholarships for local kids interested in land management. Mom suggested we designate part of the ranch as a protected nature preserve. We named it the Clara Callahan Creek Conservancy. 1 year after I closed the valve, everything had changed. The ranch was thriving not just with crops or cattle, but with people and purpose. Oak Valley was under new leadership, transparent, honest, and respectful. Mike Hansen, who once whispered in parking lots, now led community volunteer days. They helped rebuild the barn, repaint the fences, even replant native trees. Jennifer's reporting won her an award and was picked up nationally, sparking a wider investigation into HOA corruption across the country. And Sarah? Well, let's just say the line between legal partner and life partner started getting blurry somewhere between court filings and morning coffee. On a warm October afternoon, we hosted a small community gathering right along the creek. The new water system ran smoothly and legally monitored and regulated. Kids splashed in shallow pools. Parents lounged on picnic blankets. Volunteers installed signage for the new nature trail. As I stood there, beer in hand, Mom rocking gently in her chair, Sarah beside me, Mike laughing nearby, I felt something I hadn't in a long time. I raised my drink to the sky and spoke to no one in particular. Sometimes you have to dam the water to make people see its value. But the real resource isn't the water. It's respect. And this land is... It's mine again. Stories like this remind us that land isn't just dirt and water. It's memory, legacy, and the quiet strength of standing your ground when no one else will. It's about fighting the right way even when the odds are against you. Sometimes the law won't protect you. Sometimes your voice shakes. Sometimes the whole town turns on you. But if you know the truth and you stand tall long enough, the lies collapse under their own weight. And when that moment comes, when the tide turns and people finally see what really happened, the victory is sweeter than any courtroom ruling. Because it's not just about winning, it's about doing right by the people who came before you and the people who will come after. So, if you made it this far into the story, drop a 1 in the comments if you loved it. Or hit 0 if you think I should have handled it differently. I read every single one. And if you've ever had to fight back against power corruption or just plain HOA, you're not alone. Thanks for watching. See you in the next story.